right, Quebec's Charter of Values is topic one tonight, and it's a hot one. There's a danger of overgeneralizing here, but in some ways, the charter debate seems to have pitted the elites against the non-elites, or at least that was hopefully the plan as far as the PQ was concerned, making it a classic wedge issue. Andrew, Chantal, and Bruce are all in the house tonight. I want to start with, why are they trying to do this? Why do they want this as a wedge issue? What does it do for them? Or what is it supposed to do for them? Chantal?
You can't divorce this debate from, the fact that the PQ needs a majority government, more fundamentally from the fact that since the last referendum, they have lost a lot of supporters who have branched away from sovereignty onto the right or the left to other parties, because that is no longer their priority. And for the PQ, that means that the capacity of the party to be elected to government or to a majority is compromised. So this whole gambit, in large part, is about recapturing the Francophone electorate, mostly outside Montreal, on an issue that might have legs with them, since sovereignty doesn't for too many of them anymore. And even the language issue has failed to generate the kind of passions that it generated. So this is a Hail Mary pass, last chance to try to bring these people back behind the PQ and hopefully, for them, give them a majority government in the future.
Well, it seemed in the days leading up to this that it seemed to be doing that with some significant part of the population, more than what their base had been in the election. However, things have not particularly gone well for them. Today, the wedge being the wedge in their own, their own community, with the departure from the Bloc Québécois of 1/4 of its caucus. All right, one person, but.
Well, and you've got thousands of people signing a open letter from within the sovereignist ranks. You've got people like Jean Dorion denouncing them for this. I think we have to leave open the possibility that at least some of these people actually believe this. It's not all just cynical calculation, although there's a healthy dollop of it. But when you see some of the statements coming out of Madame Marois' mouth, for example, it seems to betray a genuine confusion about the state of affairs in France or in Britain, for example, about what would be the source of the tensions in those different countries. I think also that, to pick up Chantal's point, they don't have to win most of Quebec public opinion over to their side in this. They only have to get enough people in the right ridings. It's a Hail Mary pass, but it's also pretty targeted. This is going to be a real testing ground, not only for the sovereignist movement, who are deeply divided over this and are, I think, growing so by the day. It's also going to be a test for Quebec. This is really on the line. Quebec's reputation, not only in Canada but in the world, is how people respond to this.
Bruce?
Well, I agree with a lot of what Andrew just said. I do, however, think he's being kind to Premier Marois when he says she may be confused about what the effect of multiculturalism is in the UK and other countries. Her characterization in the UK as one of the defenses, one of the few and all weak defenses that she's given for this charter has been that multiculturalism in the United Kingdom is causing people to throw bombs at each other and making them no longer know who they are. I think it's telling that when pressed to provide some evidence of a problem that this charter is going to solve, the PQ government has had really nothing. So this is a sad and embarrassing bit of public policy. If there's one bright side, it's challenging our leaders at the federal level and a lot of people across the country who care about good public policy and responsible public policy to come forward and to express their arguments as well as they can. And we're seeing quite a number of good examples of that.
I think there is a brighter side to that, and it is that if anyone was in a religious minority in Quebec doubted that there were many in the Francophone so-called majority, including many sovereignists who actually will stand up for them, after this week, they should be in no doubt that that is the case. And that is where I think the PQ's calculation may fail. Quebecers may have disagreements between those who live in Montreal and those who don't, but at the end of the day, they tend to want to come around a consensual position. Now, this week, it was quite extraordinary to see that every elected official on the island of Montreal, possibly for the first time since the city became a big city, agreed that they would ask the Quebec government, if this comes to pass, to opt out and to keep Montreal out of the Charter's dispositions. There are people there who are running in a municipal election in neighborhoods that are purely Francophone. Some of them were former Bloc members and they are mayors. And all of them agreed on this, that they oppose the Charter, which sends a very powerful message to the rest of Quebec. Ironically, Madame Marois is kind of making the same calculation as Jean Charest was making. over the student strike. He was thinking Montreal supports the students and the rest of the province supports me, and the polls did show that. But when people went to vote, that is not how they voted.
You know, I was watching Bernard Drinville, the PQ minister who's kind of shepherding this thing, in an interview today, and it really seemed to me that they actually just want to be defeated on it. They want to drive. They want this to drive them to an election.
They want an election, and they want it, if possible, after the municipal election. So December 9th is the window. And why do they want an election in the cold of the end of a fall? Because otherwise the election, it's a minority government, will come in the spring with the budget. It will be about the economy. They have a very poor economic record. So they want to choose their ballot box question. It's not as if they have a variety of choices. They think this is their best shot. So they'll be looking at polls to see if they get the momentum they need. And if they do, I suspect they're going to be sorely tempted to try it.
And if there's one group that looked more uncomfortable than PQ ministers, it was the CAQ, the Coalition Avenir du Québec, who are in a very tough spot in this, because this is exactly their voters that the PQ is going after with this legislation.
Well, the latest piece of hypocrisy by the PQ on this and explaining this was after Madame Marois moved away from her "look what's happened in the UK" argument. She said, really, this policy is about bringing Quebecers together. And of course, the evidence is it's about anything but that, and it's having the opposite effect.
All right, topic 2, Tom Mulcair. You know, when the federal opposition party has a convention, they usually get a lot of attention. They didn't this week. They were in Saskatoon. There were other things going on. You know, the whole Syria thing dominated the news. This Charter of Values has dominated as well. Nevertheless, he got some attention at the end by going after Justin Trudeau, which he has chosen not to do in the past, but he really did in this exchange, as you'll see. Although he never mentioned his name, there was no doubt who he was talking about. Watch this.
If Justin Trudeau's part of something that's actually been done, we'll talk about him. You'd have to point to something that Justin Trudeau's ever done for me to be able to mention him. But if and when he does do something, but he's already advised you he won't have much to say between now and the next election, we'll of course talk about that. But what we will...
All right. So he did mention his name a couple of times. And it wasn't a convention, it was a caucus. But other than that, we got it all right. But nevertheless, he did go after Justin Trudeau, and he hasn't in the past. What's happened?
What's happened is the supernova of Justin Trudeau has burst upon the scene and has lifted the Liberals now, what, 6-7 points ahead of the Tories. The NDP are about 6 points behind the Tories. And a lot of that is obviously personality-driven, but that's the reality of leadership-focused politics. Mr. Mulcair, whatever his undoubted strengths in terms of his experience and his resume, I don't think is registering well with the general public. I think the party knows that. I think they also have perhaps a sense in that their strategy or their efforts, so far as they've made an effort to present themselves as a government in waiting, has not clicked. They've not presented a compelling proposition as to why they need to be put in power in place of the Conservatives. Trudeau, for a variety of reasons, has proven very good at attracting media all the way through the summer in a way that usually is very difficult for a third-party leader. I think they know they've got to now knock him off the pedestal. They've got to remind people of some of his weaknesses, which are enormous, and that's a worthwhile argument to have.
Glad to see that my ban on polls, backing up your arguments, has worked so well. Bruce.
Well, I think this clip is unfortunate for Mr. Mulcair. I think he's a better politician and a better leader than this clip suggests, and it's a level of personal attack that's probably one that he best avoid in the future. I do think it's important for the NDP to go after the Liberals, though. Strategically, they don't have any choice. There's no path to victory for the NDP that has the Liberals polling at 30% or any number in that vicinity, actually. Now, I think the challenge that Mr. Mulcair will have was with the second part of what he's been trying to do this week, which is to almost create a false memory of what economic policy in Canada was under the Liberals. He's trying to remind Canadians of something that I'm not sure they will reflect on and recall the same way, which is that these were days of penury and despair. I think most people will think about the Chrétien-Martin days as relatively good economic times. And so he's going to have trouble with that. Plus, I think his own economic policy is a bit thin and a bit off-center so far, at least until he puts more out.
The conventional way for the NDP to look like a government in waiting is to try to become as boring as possible so that people think that they're not dangerous. In this instance, and with the challenge from the Liberals, that's not working out very well. People say, yeah, they're boring, and they move on and forget about them. there are by-elections coming in Toronto and in Montreal. They will pit the Liberals against the NDP in both places, and Thomas Mulcair has to do, if not really well, because they're Liberal seats, at least okay enough so that he looks like he's a contender. I'm not sure there is a path to victory, frankly, for the NDP fighting Liberals at this juncture, but that's 2 years down the road. At this point, I also think that the charter debate in Quebec is tailor-made for Justin Trudeau, and that's sad for Thomas Mulcair in the sense that after sovereignty, the charter is probably the issue that sticks most to the Liberals in people's minds. And Trudeau has been running with this issue where Thomas Mulcair could have, and that means that the NDP is going to be playing catch-up for a while.
I've only got a couple of minutes left, but I want to get to this. Our friends at Global had an interview with the Information Commissioner today, and it strikes to the heart of this issue of whether or not documentation of what's going on behind the scenes is available to Canadians who look for it through access to information. Here's what she had to say. Keep in mind that Suzanne Legault is, once again, the Information Commissioner. She says, what I've seen in the last 4 months, and this is about people who are trying to get information, is not explainable except for a deterioration of the system. That's pretty hard-edged. Bruce.
Well, it's hard to imagine, based on what the Commissioner has been telling us, that there is a law that is more routinely ignored by the government. And so I think it's an important issue. This is not, the idea that we get access to information on what government's doing isn't just a nice to have in our democracy, it's like oxygen for our democracy. So when she says that complaints have gone up by 50% this year, when she says the National Police Force essentially is refusing to comply with the law, I think those are really important issues that need more airtime.
I think there's two issues. One is compliance with the law, which there can be no compromise on, and indeed this has been a pattern across a lot of different files with this government, with not giving answers to the parliamentary budget officer, not giving documents to Parliament. I do think, however, that this is showing some of the limitations of access to information laws, and we're not supposed to say this in the media because we're all in favor of it, but you're creating an incentive for people, instead of putting things on paper or an email, to have private conversations by voice only. And it's asking a lot for people not to take advantage of that incentive. You certainly can't brook that when they destroy emails, as they're accused of doing in the Ontario government, or if they don't respond to legitimate requests. But I don't think it's surprising that you're going to see people, as I say, carrying conversations in the corridors rather than by email.
It's going to be very hard to check in any way, shape, or form. But and it's not only because people are tempted to make evidence disappear. It's also because in the internet era, it's more dangerous to communicate through email than when you could send a piece of paper to another office and have numbers on the copy so that you knew exactly. And even then, there were leaks. But the reality is that beyond the Information Commissioner saying that the law has become a paper tiger, it's the historical record that's disappearing in front of our eyes, because the most important sensitive decisions are not being recorded anywhere. And so in 20 years, 30 years, there's a black hole that we're digging now, and it's only going to get bigger.
Somebody who was kind of caught up in this Senate thing said to me not too long ago, it's not just the conversations taking place in the corridors that we don't have access to, but a lot of conversations that in fact are taking place on email are taking place on private account emails as opposed to the government account emails, and they can't get access to those. Good conversation, lots more to talk about in the weeks ahead.